Maybe you've heard of the dancing manias of the Middle Ages, where some people would dance all day and night, sometimes for weeks, sometimes until they died from exhaustion. Mass hysteria, or mass-psychogenic illness, is when a group of people manifest physical symptoms without a physical cause. It's been documented for centuries all over the world, but it isn't a relic of the past. In this video, I explore some of the history, some of the causes, and ponder, perhaps, how it might tell us something about ourselves. Madness.
Knowing and dying that there is a move of God beyond anything human eyes have ever seen.
First, it's important to note that mass hysteria is often used colloquially to describe any kind of mass panic or mass delusion. Here, I'm talking about the formal definition of mass hysteria, more properly called mass-psychogenic illness, the spread of physical symptoms of illness, particularly motor or neurological symptoms, within a cohesive group of people originating from shared anxieties or fears.
Vaccine crystals? So this is what I found out. So I have a key and a bobby pin here. Explain to me why the key sticks to me. It sticks to my neck too. I got those. Yeah, so if somebody can explain this, that would be great.
Dancing manias are some of the earliest recorded instances of mass hysteria, beginning as early as the 7th century, but becoming more prominent from the 14th to 17th centuries. It's been theorized that the legend of the Pied Piper of Hamelin came from an actual event in the year 1237, where a large group of children in the town of Erfurt, Germany, south of Hamelin, began dancing erratically out of town in a trance-like state, and ended up 20 kilometers away, where some of them died of exhaustion. The first big outbreak of dancing mania is recorded to have happened from 1373 to 1374, with incidents in England, Germany, the Netherlands, France, and Belgium. But one of the most documented cases was the dancing plague of 1518 in Strasbourg, in modern-day France. Multiple historical sources describe the event. It began in July, when a woman and her daughter began dancing erratically, with convulsive movements, in the street outside of their home for no apparent reason. See, if you saw that now, you'd just be like, bath salts. People watching them soon joined in, the group growing in size each day. Onlookers feared that the dancers were being punished for their sins by Saint Vitus, a Christian martyr and the patron saint of dancing. More people joined in, and after a month, up to 400 people were dancing in the group at any one time. Witnesses described the dancers as convulsive, thrashing, and expressionless, almost trance-like. Reportedly, they would dance until their feet bled and until they collapsed from exhaustion, hunger, and thirst. As many as 15 people died each day at the peak of the event. Eventually, the local council ordered the dancers to go to St. Vitus's shrine, where a ritual was performed and they were cured. The exact death toll is not known. Events similar to this happened over several centuries across Europe, all described in similar ways. Dancing erratically and convulsively with vacant, empty expressions. People watching would join in, seemingly infected by witnessing the behavior. Up to thousands of people at a time for hours, days, weeks, or even months. These events typically occurred in times of stress and deprivation, crop failures, famines, social turmoil, and especially during the 2 major waves of the Black Death.
Mass hysteria in New York's Penn Station last night at the start of the evening rush hour. A stampede broke out after tourists and commuters heard popping sounds, which they mistakenly took to be gunfire.
Mass hysterias have occurred throughout history, taking different forms, but with several things in common: bizarre behavior and inexplicable motor or neurological symptoms that spread between people within a cohesive group who share the same fears and anxieties to some extent. From the 15th to 19th centuries, there were dozens of mass hysteria events among nuns in strict Christian convents throughout Europe. These convents housed women who were often coerced into joining as young girls, where they lived in confined, gender-segregated, socially isolated environments, taking vows of chastity and poverty, and eating near-starvation diets accompanied by lengthy periods of fasting. They also engaged in repetitious religious rituals and faced harsh punishments like flogging for even minor misbehavior. During the mass hysteria events in these convents, nuns would swear, say blasphemous things, and engage in lewd behavior like exposing their genitals and thrusting their hips, sort of pretending at sex acts, I guess. At one French convent, a nun reportedly began meowing like a cat one day, and soon more nuns joined in and meowed like cats for hours at a time. It was believed at the time that animals, and especially cats, could become demonic familiars that possessed people. In these cases involving nuns, demonic possession and witchcraft were blamed, with priests coming to exorcise the demons. Nuns who were especially disliked were accused of witchcraft, imprisoned, beheaded, or burned at the stake. The Salem witch trials are cited by some historians as an example of mass hysteria. The people of late 17th century Salem, Massachusetts, lived in a strongly hierarchical group steeped in misogyny and were deeply fearful of a literal devil. Just before the trials occurred, there had been a recent epidemic of smallpox, and there were fears about attacks from indigenous people, and social tensions in the town were high due to several ongoing disputes. In January 1692, the two young daughters of the Reverend Samuel Parris began experiencing strange symptoms: seizures, screaming in pain, thrashing and contorting their bodies, and barking like dogs. Soon after, several more young girls, all of them orphans who were marginalized in town, experienced similar symptoms. When prayers and medicine didn't work, the local doctor declared that they had been bewitched. As word spread, more people experienced strange symptoms and claimed to be seeing spirits. Soon, people were accusing their neighbors of witchcraft, often neighbors with whom they had old family feuds. Within a year, more than 200 people had been accused of witchcraft in the town of 1,400 residents, and at least 25 were killed by hanging, torture, or harsh jail conditions. Those who were not killed lost their property and legal rights. The trials only ended when the wife of the governor of Massachusetts was accused of witchcraft, and the governor ordered the establishment of a new court where spectral evidence could not be presented.
Minga has to go now. The cross compels you.
In the Industrial Revolution in the 18th, 19th, and early 20th centuries, there was an uptick in mass hysteria events, especially in factories with long hours, low wages, child labor, and terrible working conditions. Cases were recorded in England, France, Germany, Italy, and Russia, with workers suddenly experiencing violent convulsions and neurological complaints. What's really interesting is how the presentation of symptoms in mass hysteria events changed in the 20th century. Prior to then, they often presented as motor hysterias, like convulsions, tremors, dancing, in combination with trance-like states, and they were often thought to be the result of supernatural causes. But in the 20th century, both the symptoms and presumed causes of mass hysteria began to change. Symptoms were more likely to be neurological, with headaches, dizziness, nausea, fatigue, difficulty breathing, and pain. And in the early 20th century, the causes were thought to be chemical or biological in nature, like toxic gas or infectious diseases, rather than supernatural. This strongly suggests that a shift in what we fear and the cultural zeitgeist of the time plays a role in how these events present themselves and are explained.
The FBI says it has dealt with more than 2,300 reported anthrax incidents this month alone. Almost all were false alarms or hoaxes.
For example, in World War I, in my opinion, the best World War we had, World War II, good, but derivative. The first large-scale, successful use of lethal chemical weapons occurred on April 22nd, 1915, when the German army released 188 tons of chlorine gas in Belgium, killing 5,000 Allied troops and injuring at least 10,000. By the end of the war, 90,000 people had been killed and 1 million injured by poison gas. For the next 3 decades, there was a prolonged poison gas scare in the United States, resulting in multiple mass hysteria events. Strange odors in particular, whether real or imagined, became a common trigger of mass hysteria events in the 20th century. In one major case, in rural Virginia in December of 1933, a woman in the town of Fincastle reported smelling a gassy odor in her house and feeling nauseated. She and her husband feared that someone had snuck into the house and sprayed some kind of gas, for some reason. They called the police, who found nothing. Immediately after the police left, the entire family smelled the supposed gas and also felt ill. 2 members of the family believed they might have seen someone fleeing the house. A few days later, the newspaper, Roanoke Times, reported on the supposed gassing with the headline, "Gas attacks on homes continue," adding in another story of a different couple who reported smelling a strange odor in their homes and feeling a bit sick. Over the next 2 months, dozens of people in the rural county reported a strange smell in their homes that made them feel nausea, weakness, and numbness. The press reported on these claims, treating as fact the idea that it was caused by someone sneaking into people's homes at night and gassing them. Farmers began patrolling the roads at night with guns. Multiple residents were reported to have shot at shadows in the night, thinking they had seen the mysterious gasser. The Virginia legislature passed a bill imposing a stiff prison term on anyone caught gassing people. I mean, you think that would be a given anyway. But it soon became clear there wasn't any serial gasser. I mean, not in that way. In one case, a woman ran screaming from her home, saying that she had been gassed, but it turned out she was smelling a fly-killing liquid in her kitchen, the dopey cow. On 2 separate occasions, people claiming to have been gassed were actually smelling the coal stoves in their own homes. Some, in fear of being gassed, had bunged up their keyholes and sealed their windows, effectively keeping the smell in, not out. Exhaust fumes from cars driving by, the smell of burning rubber, an open container of alcohol, a radiator, all kinds of smells were being reported to be poison gas attacks. Most notably, not every member of the family in these households became sick, and police who turned up to investigate did not feel sick either. Eventually, police determined that the serial gasser was a product of overwrought imaginations.
A sign fell and many mistook the noise for gunfire. And in Virginia this afternoon, the USA Today headquarters was evacuated after a false report of a man with a gun.
New fears emerged as well, dominated by environmental fears like food contamination, water and air quality, and sanitation. The June bug outbreak is a well-known case. In June of 1962, at a textile factory in South Carolina, a rumor spread that there were insects in the factory that could cause sickness through bites. Soon, 12 workers experienced symptoms like dizziness, numbness, and nausea. The news media reported on the story, and in the next 2 days, another 50 workers came down with the mysterious symptoms. The factory employed over 900 people, but of the 62 who got sick, 58 were women working all in the same area, who had strong social ties to each other. Those affected were more likely to work overtime and to be the main income earner in their household. Most reported that the factory was a stressful place to work and sanitation was a concern. Investigators from the US Public Health Service Communicable Disease Center found no evidence of an insect in the factory that would cause the symptoms, and determined that it was a case of mass hysteria. And these events, of course, are not limited to the West. They occur worldwide. In 1985, at a school in Singapore, there were rumors that some sort of gas from a nearby construction site had penetrated the school. Then, several students claimed they noticed a strange smell, and soon, 65 students began experiencing headaches, nausea, chills, and difficulty breathing. Environmental and medical tests were performed, but nothing was found. Instead, investigators found that the children who believed the rumor about the gas were the only ones who experienced the symptoms. Children who didn't believe the rumor were immune. Then, beginning in the 1980s and culminating after 9/11, fears about terrorism and biological or chemical weapons became a more dominant theme in mass hysteria.
In the San Francisco Bay Area in California, a Muslim man beaten in broad daylight by attackers who called him a terrorist.
In October 2001, there were over 2,300 false alarms involving anthrax. In some cases, people who believed they had been exposed reported symptoms like chemical burns, when in fact, no anthrax had been found. More recently, there have been cases of police officers believing they've been poisoned by fentanyl just by touching it and showing signs of overdose. In fact, it's nearly impossible to overdose from fentanyl by touching it or from airborne powder. You'd have to swim around in a big vat of it, you crazy, crazy cracker. This was because, according to this study, nearly all police leaders interviewed were not well informed about the science and believed that dermal exposure could cause overdose and death. This belief caused fear in the lower ranks, which expressed itself as hysteria. Maybe not mass hysteria exactly, but I would argue very close to it. It's clear that mass hysteria events are dependent on unique cultural contexts and the fears and anxieties of the time. Mass hysteria is yet to be completely understood, and I suppose by virtue of that, weaponized. But there are commonalities across these events that can offer clues. It occurs within a cohesive group, and usually, but not always, spreads from the top to the bottom of the group's social hierarchy. It spreads through sight, sound, or oral communication, with smell becoming more important in the 20th century. Not everyone in the group is affected, only people who believe it is real. Media reports make it worse, spreading it more. Emotionally expressive individuals may be more likely to infect others. In some studies, individuals scoring high in extroversion and neuroticism have been associated with higher risk, but not in other studies. In some studies, scoring higher in paranoia is associated with higher risk, but not in others. In early studies, women were associated with higher risk than men, but in more recent studies, there is no consistent trend along gender lines. It seems likely that where a gender gap does exist, it does so because of social rather than biological reasons. There certainly seems to be an element of the nocebo effect at play. The placebo effect is where a fake medical treatment, like a sugar pill or saline injection, can improve a patient's condition due to their belief that the treatment will work, though it really only works with subjective symptoms like pain, fatigue, or depression. But the placebo effect has an evil twin, the nocebo effect, where a patient's belief that a fake medical treatment will have bad side effects can actually cause them to experience such effects. Again, mostly in terms of subjective symptoms. So someone who smells a strange odor and believes it will make them feel ill is more likely to actually feel ill as a result.
I didn't believe people that had it, and then it happened to me, and that's why I was like, oh, this is not happening, this can't be happening, it's not real, and then it totally was real because I was getting all these symptoms.
In psychology, similarities have been noted between mass hysteria and conversion disorder, also known as functional neurological symptom disorder. It's a condition where people feel symptoms affecting sensory or motor functions without a known medical cause. Sensory symptoms can include problems with speech, hearing, numbness, difficulties with memory or concentration, and especially visual disturbances. Motor symptoms can include weakness, paralysis, seizures, unresponsiveness, and abnormal movement. Importantly, people suffering from mass hysteria aren't faking the symptoms. They are legitimately felt and can be debilitating. The cop who touches fentanyl and keels over isn't faking it, they're freaking out. Conversion disorders most often occur when a person experiences trauma or profound stress. Patients with conversion disorder often, but not always, have a history of childhood abuse, and are more likely to have other disorders like anxiety and depression. They're more likely to be of lower socioeconomic status, to have less education, and to live in rural areas. They're more likely to have poor psychological coping skills, and more likely to have somatic problems like generalized pain and fatigue. There are two major schools of thought about what causes conversion disorder. The psychodynamic model postulates that physical symptoms are caused by emotional conflict, where the emotional struggle is relegated to the unconscious mind as a defense mechanism, then manifesting itself as a physical symptom. You know, stuff it deep down inside and keep an eye on it, then conclude your headaches are from 5G. The second school of thought is the cognitive behavioral model, where, in short, a person is exposed to information about a specific symptom and begins to worry about it so much and look for it in themselves so much that eventually those thoughts override their actual sensory input, and they begin to experience those symptoms for real. Again, it's worth stressing that they aren't imagining the symptoms or faking it, but rather neurological changes in the brain have actually produced the symptoms. The most effective treatment for conversion disorder is cognitive behavioral therapy, with emphasis on helping patients learn to understand and express their emotions. What is clear is that mass hysteria mirrors the most prominent social concerns, and that it is triggered by a shared sense of fear over a particular threat that may or may not be real, and that it always occurs when a group is in duress and involves symptoms affecting either motor function, neurological function, or both. So what can we learn from this? Well, the human mind is powerful, and as social animals, our collective minds can be even more powerful. Our fears and traumas and stress spreading between us, infecting us, even if we don't realize it. One expert has called it cathartic reactions to psychosocial stress, which I guess is a sciencey way of saying sometimes when people can't cope, they go mental. Because we no longer fear demons and ghosts and possessed cats, most of us anyway, our fears have taken on new forms with which to torture ourselves. And perhaps, as humans, we are primed to believe in dangerous, invisible forces that are out to get us. It's just, we don't think they're demons anymore, we think it's the Wi-Fi. So there you go. Isn't that nice? I personally like to think that some of the dancing manias of the past have been grossly misreported and they were just massive keggers. Thanks very much for watching. I'll see you next time. Don't forget you can support me on Patreon, follow me on Hysteria, whatever. Bye. Shala, shalalala. This is what I'd be doing in a mass hysteria event, like, oh yeah. When he drops dead, I'm gonna rob him.